I haven't done one of these in a while, but book review. Finally, I have finished a book I was reading, and it's a Korean book. I don't have a physical copy of it. It's in ebook format, but the title of the book is the Bud- Buddha, the Human, His Great Life and Ideology. And it's from my Buddhism teacher, the Venerable Bamyun Snim. And let me see if I can find the cover. Anyway, this book is a biography of basically the Buddha's life, and it doesn't just give you like the events of like, hey, this happened, and this happened. It's more of reviewing the sutras that talk about the Buddha's life and recontextualizing um, the text by kind of giving you the societal background of when these events happened, and then if the sutra has some fantastical elements, trying to kind of culturally tie the strings together to paint a picture of why they might have described it a certain way, kind of a thing, right? So the book is very sutra focused because that is where the source of the information is. It's less about like a scholarly article review, peer reviewed historical assessment of the Buddha's life. It's more about first seeing Buddha through the sutras, and then by doing like a survey of the culture and the history of India at the time, trying to analyze why this is so significant. And so I won't bore you with all the details of the Buddha's life. Well, the thing is, Buddha's life is defined by very critical points, and the 4 points. There's two versions basically within the Buddhism community. There's the 4 point version of Buddha's life, and there's like the 8 point version of Buddha's life. And the 4 point version is number one, Buddha was born in Lumbini, which is like now current day Nepal. Buddha obtained, awakening. And number three, Buddha first spread the word of Dharma. And number four, Buddha dies. So that's basically like the four, significant events. And the eighth version of it is just like some more details in between. But basically, Buddha was born, and then went through a bunch of life, and then reached awakening. I'll explain some parts of it later. And then after awakening, he, instead of just like keeping the awakening to himself, he shared it with people. And now after this point, his entire life is about sharing the Dharma, and then he passes away his human body. So with this kind of overarching big kind of a trajectory of life, what does the sutra say, right? Because these are just kind of like historical events, but the sutra actually starts from way before Buddha was born, right? So the sutra, the sutra is basically like the Bible for Buddhists. Anyway, it's like it's like written holy text kind of a thing, but Buddhism doesn't really have this idea of a holy thing. There's no like spirit, afterlife, reincarnation, blah blah blah. So the sutras, although it doesn't have those although Buddhism at its core doesn't have those fantastical elements, starts out by saying Buddha had 1,000 past lives, and that is because Buddhism came from India. And as you know, India is predominantly Hindu. And so the people who kind of wrote these sutras, these recordings after the Buddha's passing, they recontextualize it with the Hindu kind of principles and the ideas, so that the Buddha's ideas can be a little bit more well received. Because after Buddha's passing, it was kind of difficult to keep that kind of religious movement going forward, especially because it was kind of a minority, right? Because the entire Indian subcontinent is still predominantly Hindu. So to kind of assimilate into the Indian culture, it borrowed concepts of like past lives and reincarnations. But basically, Buddha, from multiple past lives, he has progressively done good, sacrificed himself for the awakening, and like constantly went through cycles of life for accruing goodwill, accruing good actions and blessings, and so on. And then on one ripe opportunity, right? The Buddhas, they found the way to determine this is the life where you will incarnate as a human, but then you will reach Buddhahood in this life. So, again, these are sutra related things. They have fantastical elements about like how the Buddha was like separated from. He was born from the side of the mother. He was and then after he was born, he circled around 7 times immediately. Blah blah blah. So basically, all these accounts of things that are physically impossible for a human baby to do, but it's all symbolistic, right? So the 7 circling is basically signifying the 6 realms of reality that the Hindu tradition has, and the Buddha has circled all of them, and then once more to signify that he has transcended the 6 worlds, basically how the world has been defined. And why did Buddha come from the side instead of like from the belly like normal people? It's because in the Hindu tradition, like the religious kind of the lore, the people in the different caste systems, they are from the holy people are from the head, and the practical people are from the limbs, and the noble people are from the torso and things like that, right? So, and Buddha was born a prince, so it's signifying that. So basically the entire book goes about piece by piece about the Buddha's life in the sutras, and then tries to recontextualize it with the historical context at the time, what India was like, and so on. So now that I've read this book, what really stands out to me? And by the way, this book is a prerequisite for my upcoming Indian pilgrimage. So through my Buddhist order, I am going on a pilgrimage to India in January, and basically I will be visiting all the sites where Buddha's life has touched. Gonna go to his birth site, going to go where he obtained his awakening, gonna go to where he first spread the word of Dharma, gonna go to where he had his first temple, gonna go to where he converted many of his famous students, gonna go to where all the sutras were written, gonna go to where he eventually passed away and such. But anyway, that was why this is kind of a required reading prior to that pilgrimage. But okay, so now that I'm done reading, what really sticks in my mind? So, what really sticks in my mind is this. Buddha was from 2600 years ago, right? And while there have been other religious figures, there have been no other Buddhas. And Buddha is, of course, referring to, Gautama Siddhartha, but at the same time, the Buddha is a title, right? The human is Shakyamuni, right? Gautama Shakyamuni. But because he has awakened, he has the title of the Buddha, which means awakened one. So, after Buddha, there has been nobody with the same idea, with the same awakening that the Buddha had. And you know what? I get it. I can't confirm that, right? I can't confirm that nobody has independently come to the same awakening as Buddha, right? But nobody else outside of Buddha has impacted the world as Buddha did, right? So Buddha is a guy from India, and I'm a guy from Korea living in the United States, and I know about Buddhism, right? So this is a big impact, and there were lots of discriminations in India. There were lots of difficulties that made life difficult for the Buddha. But you know what? He didn't care. He knew what was good and he knew what he had to do. So he not only got the awakening personally, but he spent his entire life not in pursuit of getting richer, not in pursuit of getting more, delicious foods and acquiring, anything other than spreading the awakening that he had. So there could have been people who got through the spiritual awakening and like got the Buddha same awakening that the Buddha had. Like for example, the two core principles that the Buddha awakened is this. Number one, everything is interrelated. Nothing is separate by itself. Nothing is in isolation. I exist in relational. I exist in temporal. I exist in spatial relationship to others. And so, over space and time, everything is interrelated and everything changes, right? It's just that the relationship temporarily forms and then ceases, and then temporarily forms and ceases, and temporarily forms and ceases across time and space. That's the first thing that that's the core, one of the two core principles of the awakening that he had. The second is the middle way, right? So as humans, we go through this cycle of intense desire, and we yearn for something, and we suffer because of it, right? So we always thought that the two options were, number one, get it. Let's just get the desire done, right? Let's just, I want to kill that guy. Let's just kill that guy. I want to, eat. So let's just eat. I want to, masturbate. So let's masturbate. So one way is to just follow through with the desire, regardless of what happens after that. And the other way we traditionally thought is like restraint. I really want to, but I'm going to restrain, and that is stressful, right? So on one end, you just keep following the infinite cycle of desire, and on one end, you forcefully stop, and then you keep acquiring stress. But the middle way that the Buddha discovered in his awakening is, what if it's possible to just let the desire be? Like, the desire is there, but then, like anything else, it's a temporary thing. It's going to come up and it's going to cease. It's going to come up and it's going to cease. I don't have to do anything with it. I don't have to contain it. I don't have to let it control me. I can just let it be, right? And these two principles are what the Buddha awakened, right? But you know what? I get it. There's lots of other religions, there's lots of other spiritual teachings that more or less kind of come similar to this, like the four agreements, right? Be impeccable with your word, and then I forget the other three, but basically it's like parts of Buddha's the knowledge that the Buddha had. Many of the teachings of Jesus, it's practical applications of what you do with this kind of awakened mind. But what I'm saying is, there's nobody else from other parts of the world after Buddha that has the same kind of awakening that the Buddha had, and was able to successfully or impactfully spread it to the world. And so now I've been just looking at post-Buddha, right? But what about pre-Buddha? India has a rich and long history. But where else has a rich and long history? Egypt and the entire continent of Africa. So when I look at the history of Egypt, when I look at the philosophers of olden days, I do see there were people who were influential thinkers. But what I learned is that at the time, the knowledge that we had about the world was very, very incorrect. Because why? Science wasn't advanced enough to kind of get a truly accurate assessment of the world, right? So that does play a part. So Buddha was almost kind of ready. The world was kind of ready for a Buddha. And this is something that's very largely expressed in the book. India at the time was going through many, many, many different wars. India at the time, the caste system was at its peak. And at the same time, because of social unrest, there were many conflicts with the new kind of societal development and the imposing caste system, and there was always war and turmoil and natural disasters and such. So the world was waiting for some kind of a savior to save them, some kind of an enlightened person, and at the same time, the world was advanced enough to kind of have a system of knowledge that people could learn from, although it was reserved usually for the higher castes. So, Buddha, born a prince, and because he was born a prince, got access to the best teachers in the kingdom, and got access to all this knowledge that has accrued over the years. So, Buddha was very smart. He was very wise, and he also not only was book smart, because like kings and princes, they learn how to behave, right? So in his conversations, in his actions, he was also very graceful. He was very adept at talking to people, and on top of that, he had this personal mission to eliminate all suffering from mankind, right? So, but had he not had those the knowledge set, it would have been very difficult, right? And also, Buddha did have many difficulties in the quest to awakening. Namely, his parents really wanted him to, continue the lineage of the kingdom. He wanted, the parents wanted him to be the future king. But what did he do? No, like, I don't want to be a future king. And so he expressed his desire to leave the kind of world and be a monk. He wanted to live a monastic life. But the parents are like, please don't go. Like, we bet our entire lives on you, and you're like the only prince. Please. And then, this is prior to his, departure from home. So Buddha was human too, right? He had a very, like, oh, am I doing this really bad thing to my parents? And so I was like, you know what? Alright, so he was having a kind of a wishy-washy time, and then the parents saw that as an opportunity and said, you know what, we'll make you marry someone super beautiful, right? And then so they prepared someone very, very beautiful, and then Buddha eventually, married her, right? But even though he married her for the sake of his parents, he wasn't really set on settling down, right? And so he goes and never has, any kind of, physical contact or, intimacy with the wife, so there's no children. So the Buddha is like, you know what, the longer I stay here, the more obstacles I'm gonna have. And keep in mind, prior to the marriage, the kings and the king and the queen, they're trying their best to keep Buddha's mind occupied with the real life, because they could already tell that Buddha's mind was off to some greater quest for humanity. So they constantly provided him with the best food, the best bedding, the best clothing, the best women, the best liquor, and so on, right? So Buddha has had a taste of all of that. But even with his intoxication of the goods of the world, he was still occupied with this idea of, but there's still suffering. Even this doesn't last. This is not a solution to suffering. And so, Buddha, after a certain point, he was intent, right? He was like, okay, you know what? I really gotta go. I really gotta leave the palace. Gotta go out into the wild. I have to find the answer for life. And so, the parents were like, just give us a prince. Just give us your child. Just give us a grandson. And then so, Buddha was like, okay, you know what? Alright. And so he had Rahula, his son. And then after that, he gave his child one last look, for he feared that if he held the child, he would have to linger even more. And he made the decision to leave home in search for the answers, right? So, this, why I went on kind of at length to tell you this story is this. After that, it took 6 years of non-ending voluntary suffering to cleanse all of the dopamine rush, what we would call these days, right? He transcended his human capacities by 6 years of continued self-inflicted torture. Because at the time, self-inflicted torture was meant to be kind of like the best way to kind of arrive at a clear mind, right? And so Buddha took that very seriously, and he trained very, very hard for 6 years. And after that, he recognized that all this does is harm the body, and so he came out of the mountains to stop the suffering. Almost died because of the lack of energy, but survived to reach his awakening at a comfortable spot without suffering, right? And so 6 years of voluntary suffering, 49 days of meditation to arrive at the awakening. Now, many people compare Jesus' life to the Buddha's life. And Jesus had a few weeks in the desert, right? So Buddha had 6 years. And there's a school of thought that says, hey, basically, in Jesus's life, Jesus was born a carpenter. Jesus was already born humble. Jesus wasn't really tainted with the world's riches and the dopamine, so to speak. So it took relatively less time for Jesus to cleanse himself of the humanhood and become the Son of God, right? And so Buddha took 6 years because he had more of that in his system. Now, imagine if Buddha was born today, right? Every source of conceivable dopamine is available in the reach of your fingertips. Everyone is the majority of the world has food to eat, although the quality of food differs. The majority of the world has clothing. The majority of the world has some sort of a quality of life, although there are very big discrepancies, right? So the world 2,000 years ago compared to now, can you imagine how difficult it would be? And again, right now we have Buddhism as a structured kind of way of living. But if Buddhism didn't exist, and so the universal answer to reduce and to completely eradicate suffering from your life, imagine that didn't exist now. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to arrive at that same answer? So Buddha's life, right, and the existence of Buddha is almost like a miracle. It's like it happened at the perfect time, I can kind of say. And maybe that is why the sutras say it took so many iterations of lives to pick the right time. But I'm not trying to say that there's a divine time for anything, right? It's not that. The primary take that I get after reading about Buddha's life is that Buddha came at the right time to get to the awakening and leave a legacy. We, in this day and age, are at the right time to access that awakening and apply it to our lives. Because do you think it'll be easy to be a monastic monk then versus a lay person now? And have access to the same kind of knowledge that the Buddha had, right? The awakening is much more accessible now. The ability to remove suffering from your life is more accessible now. So, at the time, although Buddha came up with it, although Buddha discovered it, not came up with it, Buddha discovered what was true with the universe and propagated that knowledge. And now we are at the right time to absorb it with great effectiveness. And it is our time now. It is the ripe time to be influential with this knowledge, influential with this acquired wisdom, to make the world a place free of suffering. So, there's a right time for everything, right? Just like how, plants, trees, crop They are harvested in the winter and seeded planted in the spring. So Buddha's time was ripe for discovering the truth. And we are at the time to pick it up with ease. And it is time now, if you are a Buddhist, to act, to spread the word, and to be a leading force in removing suffering from people's lives. And the book ultimately gave me more conviction about what I must do as a Buddhist living in the year 2024. Wow, that was a lot longer than I anticipated. So that's my 30-minute-ish review of the book called The Human Buddha, His Great Life and Great Ideologies. And so I don't know if this book will ever be published in English. I'll talk to my Buddhist order and see if there's a translation, or if not, maybe I could be the translator for it. But if you are interested in learning more about the Buddha's life, I would be happy to make a future series of videos covering Buddha's life, but I will talk more about each part of Buddha's life then. But for now, this was the book review. The next book I will review is probably the Lankavatara Sutra, which is another Buddhist, Mahayana Buddhist sutra. And then after that, I'm planning to read something for leisure. Alright, well, in any case, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.